My name is Emily Carter, and today was supposed to be perfect. I had reserved the private room at Marlowe's Bistro weeks ago, paid the deposit early, and carefully sent out my birthday invitations, each one personalized with a little note. I had imagined laughter bouncing off the walls, friends clinking glasses, maybe even a surprise or two. But now, as I sit alone at the corner table, the gentle clink of silverware against empty plates is the only sound that fills the room. I smooth the silk of my blouse over my shoulders, the soft fabric doing nothing to calm the lump in my throat. The candles flicker faintly across the polished oak table, and I catch my reflection in the window. My hair perfectly curled, makeup intact, but my eyes betraying the disappointment I can't seem to shake. My phone buzzes again. Another message, probably a sorry, can't make it. Or worse, no response at all. A small, bitter laugh escapes me. I had expected this, in some cynical corner of my mind, but I hadn't wanted to believe it. Everyone else's lives, they're busy, they say, yet the emptiness here feels like a spotlight on my failure, as if the world is quietly telling me that my happiness isn't important. I take a deep breath, feeling the aroma of vanilla candles and roasted coffee swirl around me, grounding me. I refuse to let the silence break me. Today, I remind myself, is still my day. Even if no one shows up, I will find a way to celebrate the person I am, strong, resilient, and unapologetically myself. I remember that first real birthday disappointment vividly. I was 24, living in a small apartment in Chicago, brimming with excitement over finally hosting a party that felt like mine. I had spent hours picking the perfect invitations, curating a playlist that would make everyone dance, baking cupcakes that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, and even crafting little handmade favors. I wanted people to feel the warmth I felt inside. But the moment I shared the news, the cracks appeared. My family, preoccupied with their own routines and grievances, dismissed it casually. "It's just another birthday, Emily," my older sister had said, scrolling through her phone, eyes barely lifting. My friends, once so lively and enthusiastic, began canceling one by one. Some had work obligations, others sick relatives, and a few never responded at all. I clutched the stack of RSVP cards in my trembling hands, the edges soft from nervous folding, and felt the sting of invisibility settle deep in my chest. I remember pacing the tiny living room, feeling my heartbeat echo in my ears, my palms sweaty against the smooth surface of the counter. A lump formed in my throat as tears threatened to fall, but I swallowed them back stubbornly. Then, I noticed the small silver locket my grandmother had given me years ago, tucked away in a jewelry box, a simple heart, engraved with the words, "You are enough, always." I held it tightly in my palm and whispered to myself, I can make my own happiness. It wasn't just words, it was a promise. That evening, instead of collapsing into despair, I cleaned up the kitchen, lit a single candle, and allowed myself to enjoy my own presence. I called my favorite cousin, someone who truly understood me, and we laughed over my solo cupcake feast. It was small, but it was mine. That night, I realized something crucial. People's absence doesn't define my worth. Their neglect could either bury me or push me to grow stronger. And I chose the latter. I decided then that I would never again rely on the approval or presence of those who didn't value me. That silver locket rested against my chest as I drifted off to sleep, a quiet talisman of resilience, a reminder that even when ignored, I could stand tall and celebrate myself. After that night, I threw myself into building a life that no one could ignore, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I started with small steps, freelancing in graphic design, taking online courses, reading books on entrepreneurship and personal growth. Nights blurred into mornings as I worked tirelessly in my tiny apartment, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my determination. There were moments of self-doubt, of course, when a client rejected a design, or when I questioned whether I had the talent to truly make it on my own, but each setback only fueled a quiet, simmering resolve. It was during a workshop that I met Valerie, a seasoned creative director with an uncanny ability to see potential where others saw mediocrity. She took me under her wing, offering guidance and encouragement I hadn't realized I was missing. "Emily," she said one evening over coffee, "stop waiting for validation. Make your work undeniable. Let the results speak for themselves." Her words became my mantra. I started taking bigger risks. I invested in my own small studio, a modest but bright space that smelled faintly of paint and ambition. I worked on freelance projects for brands that challenged me, pushed me to innovate, and slowly began to attract attention. My first major client came through referral, a boutique fashion label that loved my aesthetic. The excitement of seeing my designs displayed, knowing I was paid for my vision, was intoxicating. I kept the news quiet, no social media posts, no casual mentions to my family. Success was my secret shield. As months turned into years, my achievements grew. I expanded my services, collaborated with international clients, and eventually started my own creative consultancy. I celebrated small victories privately. My first profitable quarter, my first team of interns, the day I could pay off my student loans entirely on my own. Each milestone was a quiet victory over the neglect I had once felt. I also learned to honor the little joys I had once taken for granted. Morning coffee in the sunlight streaming through the studio windows, the satisfying scratch of pen on sketchbook, the hum of music while I worked late into the night. Each of these became a reminder that my happiness didn't need validation from anyone else. Even now, years later, as I glance at the stack of unopened birthday invitations on my desk, memories of past letdowns, I realize I'm no longer the same Emily who once felt invisible. That young woman, clutching a silver locket and whispering words of resilience to herself, would barely recognize the life I've built. And yet, in every decision, in every success, I carried her. With me, the Emily who refused to be defined by absence, the Emily who chose herself when no one else would. Years later, the invitations went out again. This time, they weren't for a small, nervous gathering. This time, they were for the grand opening of my consultancy's flagship studio, an event that I knew would be impossible to ignore. The private room at Marlowe's Bistro had been replaced by a sleek, sunlit space in downtown Chicago, complete with minimalist decor, contemporary art, and a display of my work that spoke louder than any introduction I could offer. I watched them arrive one by one. Family members, old friends who had ghosted my birthdays in the past, colleagues from earlier jobs who had underestimated me. There was a pause at the entrance, the subtle hitch in their steps as they took in the room. The walls, painted a muted cream, were lined with framed designs I had created for clients all over the country. The polished concrete floor reflected the soft lighting, and a long table bore an array of hors d'oeuvres, each crafted to perfection. I could see them counting the number of people who had RSVP'd and wondering where the rest were. But there was no missing the most important detail. I was standing confidently at the center, wearing a tailored emerald blazer, hair perfectly styled, a soft smile that belied years of struggle. "Emily," my sister said finally, the word catching in her throat. This is wow." I let her stare for a moment longer before speaking. "I see you've come," I said smoothly, gesturing toward the display boards. I wasn't sure if anyone would show up today, so I made sure to create something I could celebrate regardless. Their eyes widened as they scanned the designs, portfolios, and awards displayed around the room. You did all this?" my mother asked, voice tinged with disbelief. "All on your own?" I nodded. "Yes. Every late night, every small step, every rejection I ever faced, this is the result." And no, it wasn't easy. I had mentors who believed in me, clients who trusted me, and most importantly, I believed in myself. I don't need anyone to validate my worth. I built it, brick by brick. My former friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing for the first time that the quiet, overlooked Emily they once ignored had become someone who could not be dismissed. The recognition in their eyes was almost painful, a mixture of shame, awe, and the faintest trace of regret. I walked them through the studio, explaining each piece, each client collaboration, each milestone. Their silence was heavy, filled with unsaid apologies, missed opportunities, and the recognition of their own neglect. But I didn't need their validation. I wanted them to see, to understand that the absence, the dismissals, the birthdays forgotten did not stop me. They had fueled me. When I finally stopped, I let the room linger in that quiet tension. No one clapped. No one tried to interrupt. They were simply taking it all in. And in that moment, I felt a powerful shift. I was no longer the girl who waited for validation at a birthday table. I was Emily Carter, a woman who celebrated herself, whether anyone showed up or not. Standing there, watching their expressions flicker between awe, guilt, and disbelief, I realized just how much power had shifted. I no longer needed their approval, but I could choose to extend a hand, on my terms. This was my moment, not just to reveal success, but to define boundaries, to demand respect, and to ensure the past wouldn't repeat itself. I cleared my throat and let my gaze sweep across the room. If we're going to move forward, I said, voice calm but firm, things need to be different. I've spent years building a life that respects my worth, my time, and my energy. Anyone who chooses to be part of it must honor that. My sister looked confused, her hands twisting nervously. I continued. That means honesty, accountability, and commitment. No more last-minute cancellations, no more empty promises. I won't be treated like an afterthought, and neither should my time. Turning to my friends, I added, support is not optional, it's active. If you care about me, you show up, but I also expect you to pursue your own dreams instead of leaning on me as a crutch. This isn't punishment, it's growth. We either rise together or we don't. I've learned that my happiness can't depend on anyone else anymore. I could see the shift in their eyes, the realization that I had become someone unafraid to demand respect. My mother, usually so quick to criticize, met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding. I didn't realize, she started, voice hesitant. You didn't, I replied softly, not unkindly. But now you do. I'm willing to forgive, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or bending to old patterns. I will support you, guide you, and celebrate you, but only if you meet me halfway. Respect, presence, and integrity are non-negotiable. The room was quiet, but the air felt electric. I could feel the tension, yes, but also the potential. This wasn't about punishing them for the past birthdays they ignored or the opportunities they missed. It was about creating a healthier dynamic for the future. I had transformed absence and neglect into lessons that shaped who I had become. Finally, I stepped back and allowed a small smile. I'm still the same Emily you knew in some ways. But I am also someone stronger, wiser, and in control of my life. If you want to be part of it, you will rise to meet me. Otherwise, I will continue building my world, unapologetically, with or without you. For the first time in years, I felt the room respond, not with words, but with the weight of realization. They were confronted with their choices, and I was unshakable, yet not cruel. I had mastered the delicate balance between compassion and firmness. My silence carried authority, my presence radiated power, and for the first time, I felt the true sweetness of standing fully in my worth. In the weeks that followed, I watched the subtle changes unfold. My sister began showing up on time, not just for events, but for conversations, offering genuine interest and listening without distraction. Friends who had once flaked on plans now reached out consistently, sharing their own successes and struggles, asking for advice, and celebrating victories, small and large, with me. Even my mother, after an awkward but honest heart-to-heart, started respecting boundaries she had never acknowledged before. I often caught myself smiling quietly, alone in my studio, when I noticed these shifts. The small silver locket my grandmother gave me, once a talisman in my loneliest birthday, now rested on my desk next to a framed photo of the first client who believed in me. It was a reminder of the journey, from quiet disappointment to triumphant independence, from being ignored to commanding attention on my own terms. Reflecting on everything, I realized that the birthdays I thought were failures had been lessons in disguise. They taught me resilience, self-reliance, and the value of selective trust. I had learned to celebrate myself, to honor my own achievements, and to surround myself with people who chose to show up, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely cared. That night, alone in the glow of my studio lights, I held the locket in my hand and whispered softly, "I did it." I became someone worthy of her own respect. I realized I no longer craved validation from those who had once disappointed me. Instead, I cherished the life I had painstakingly built, the strength I had discovered, and the relationships that had evolved into mutual respect and love. I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around my space, the canvases, the designs, the subtle reminders of every struggle and triumph. And I smiled. Not the tentative, hopeful smile of the Emily who once waited in vain for her friends to arrive, but a calm, unwavering smile of someone who had learned the ultimate truth. She could celebrate herself. Always. Because in the end, birthdays are just a date on a calendar. Happiness, pride, and accomplishment are what we choose to create every single day. And I, Emily Carter, had learned to do just that with elegance, with strength, and with grace. Bottom of form.